All right, we are live. Yeah, very excited for today's live stream. For all the people in the world who are tuning in for live stream, we are starting a bit early, and let's see how this goes. 3 more minutes and then we will start. All right, let me do some cleanup. Okay. Yeah. All right, so camera sees. All righty. I guess the audio is okay. For anyone who is in the live stream, please let me know. How is the audio? Is it too loud? All right. So excited to talk about photography today on a Sunday morning, 8 a.m. There's a lot of things we need to discuss, and can't get can't wait to get started. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, the world. Uh, Thank you for tuning in to this live stream today. And today we're going to talk about photography, my favorite topic in the world. And anybody who is interested in photography would know the amount of things that they need to buy, they need to invest, and it's a very niche and expensive hobby to begin with. But if you want to pursue for your rest of your life, yeah, it's an investment that I think will pay off someday. And so today, let's start talking about photography. But before that, I want to let you know we have started our alissaandj.com, our website, where I will be posting our travel, photos, videos, blogs, etc. Here, I want to go a bit about how our website functions. Like we have 3 different sections, basically travel, tech, videos, photos, etc. So here, if you go to tech, this is where we will go for the majority of our journey in this live stream. In travel, we'll be posting travel vlogs and such, which you can have a look at this part. Yeah, we have a few blogs here already, like blogs about Brunei, Myanmar, and this is, of course, evolving page. Yeah, over time you will see a lot of posts about a lot of countries. Alissa has traveled to 36 countries and still planning to go abroad to several other places as well. And here in videos, you can check out our channel. Yeah, this is our channel. We make a lot of videos about travel vlogs, our camera content, camera reviews, recommendations for new beginners, intermediates, and even professionals, how gear would actually benefit them. And here we have our photos, nature and wildlife, mostly, but I do visit places, take photos of architecture as well. But here we have our photo collection, instead of posting an Instagram, I do want to have my own website where I post my photos. And here you can go to wildlife, a lot of photos. You can click on them to enlarge them and view them. Yeah, I think this is a wonderful thing that I'm able to do it today. And yeah, so since I posted this live stream, I've been working on this website. I've been working on the page where I want to conduct this live stream. Basically, we are not going into presentation mode. Rather, we're going to go to the website and we're going to learn from there. Okay, this website is Tech Talk. I'll be talking all the tech and give you the honest reviews of all the products that I have used in the past and review them. So I have a few posts over there, but not like 100% aligned. So whatever the script I'm using to talk in the video, I'm just writing it as a post so far. But going from now, I will be having a structured path for all of my reviews. So it'll be something like this, all right? I think let me minimize myself so that you can have a better view, all right? Okay, so I think you have a clear view now. So here, this page is tech.alissa.com/art-of-photography, art of photography. So you can go to this link and you can actually start looking at the content in there. So it's not a presentation that I want to share or it need to be shared. So it's already there online. It's live. So you can go to this website, tech.alissajay.com, ALISSAJAY.com/art-of-photography. So that's the link. You can visit that page, or you can actually navigate from the main page. So here we are, alissajay.com, ALISSAJAY.com, DOT, not DOT.com. And from there, you click on the tech. So it will take you to the tech website, tech.alissajay.com. And from there, you can click the post, art of photography. Right. So from there, you can have this entire content of all the things that we are going to discuss in the live stream. So here we have the table of contents. Yeah, and in the table of contents we see the chapters. We have 4 chapters that I want to discuss today with you guys within the 4-hour time period that I'm setting for the live stream today. It's a long time, I know, because I have a lot of things to show you. I have set up my table to display several things like a few cameras, lenses, lights, filters, tripod, a lot of things. So a lot to discuss. So let me go back here. Right, so we have a lot to discuss. So a lot of chapters, why photography, the elements of photography, the tools and expenses incurred. So that, and what are the different types of photography and techniques with examples. For the last 2 chapters, I think this is like an introductory part, the session 1. I named it session 1 because the last 2 chapters is like very, each topic under them is already like a huge multiple hour topic. So everything cannot be covered in like 4 hours time. So it's going to be like an introductory topic in this live stream. Let's start from the first one, okay? So here you also have the help guide. For everybody to be convenient, like whoever is visiting my page, I will have some sort of help guide to the products that I review in my channel. In today's video, I want to talk about Sony A7C II and Sony A6700 camera primarily because that's the camera that I own. And I want to talk photography from that perspective. And so if anybody is owning those 2 cameras or any of the Sony cameras in the Sony newer ecosystem, you can get your help guide from here. Or I'm showing you like from where you can go to the Sony website and then download it from there as well. So here you have this. All right, so let me close it. Let's go to art of photography. Let me talk a bit about why photography of all things, right? Like the people who want to get into art, there are several types of art, but why do you want to choose photography? Your art is your own, so you need to think about what kind of art you want to put out to the world. if you're satisfied with your art, that's what is most important. So considering photography as an art, you are free to do whatever you want. With that in mind, you have to think about how you're going to create your art. So that's something you have to always remember. You starting out, then you become an intermediate, then you become a pro. You still have to think photography as an art. Otherwise, you will never get to the niche that you want to go. Once you find the niche, actually, several pro photographers finding their niche actually help them to achieve the peak that they have achieved so far. So, photography is an art. Pursue it like an art. So that's why. Why photography? Um, you see, I enjoy nature. I enjoy looking at wildlife. I want to be one with them. So I usually go out, be with them, be in the nature, just listen to the sounds, look at the birds, animals. I like to photograph them. Like I want to keep it in my mind. It's like freezing the time itself. So whenever I look at those pictures, I go back in time. I'm like, okay, on that day I did see this animal, and it was sitting there, and all the thoughts come back to me. It's like time traveling. So I see each and every single photo here that I'm displaying as a time traveling thing, right? That's the thing about photography for me. So you define what photography is for you, all right? So, and also if you click on this image, it will take you to this page. All right, so from here you can look at all the other images. It's like a collage of them. So basically, if you want to see more of them, you can click that image and go there. And here I have a bit more of the gallery, but this is actually downsized gallery. So if you click on them, you will not be able to see the full resolution images. And you have to click on this X mark to come out of it. And you can navigate by pressing arrow keys. Yeah. So I hope you like all those pictures. This is me, and this is some of my work, and I love to photograph. That's me, right? And I do have some summary written over there, why photography again and again. But yeah, it's up to you to get inspired to get into photography. You have to define why photography is something that you have chosen, right? The second part is like motivation. Why do you get motivated to take photos? That you have to define as well. So some people, they want to make money out of photography. So they want to choose photography as a means to make money, right? They eventually become professionals. But I wouldn't say the wedding photographers as professionals. They are kind of in between professional and the kind of people who are looking to find a job, right? I cannot pinpoint some wedding photographers are actually quite interested in making an art out of it, but most wedding photographers, especially in India, if you go to any wedding, they are like cliche kind of photos. They have their own templates. They just shoot in that structure, which I kind of not like. You know, every photograph should be different and candid. That's something I like. So I don't consider wedding event and sport photography to be like art, but it can be, right? There are additional type of photographers who are really amazing professionals. They make money out of their photography, like travel photographers, wildlife photographers, uh, like project photographers. There are a few photographers who do projects. They go out, they have a theme in mind, they want to achieve the theme. So those professionals, they make money out of them. And yeah, they are professionals because they have found their niche. So there must be something that motivates you to do photography, not just money. It's about you, how you want to describe your life. It's a life worth of thing that you're doing, getting into photography. Yeah, I will explain to you later because of all the expenses that you will see in the near future, you will understand how much of life savings will go into photography. All right. The next part, sorry. Okay. So far, we have just seen why and what is photography, what motivates you to take photos. Now, the next part I want to talk about is like when you see this picture, like what is digital, right? Like there has been a transition from film photography to digital photography. I've been a photographer for 12 years. I started my photography as like a university student who borrowed DSLR cameras from seniors, and I started my photography back then. And during those days, I was too keen on film photography because I think film photography is closer to nature, being original. Like it's got this analog structure to the photos that you see, and which was not possible from the digital cameras back then, the DSLRs. The sensors are okay, but they are not quite natural. The reason is the pixel sizes on that consumer level cameras were pretty small. I will get to the detail part later, but for now, this is a digital photograph, right? But what attracts you here? What is the first thing you notice? This is what I want to see in this picture. This is a black and white picture. What do you notice, right? Just note it down for now. We will discuss later. The same picture, the colored version. What do you notice here? I hope you guys are like going into this website and you are opening up this page and you're looking at these pictures, because from this live stream, I'm definitely sure that it's all like very muddled down. You don't see any clear image. But if you were to go from your laptop or your uh, mobile, even for mobile, it's available. You can go to the browser. You can click on tech.alissaj.com/art of photography with hyphens. And yeah, this image, what do you notice? Right? Make a mental note of what do you notice first on these images. So I have it here in the slider mode. You can slide each of these images to say what is the one thing that you notice first. Right? As of this part is going to be for beginner photographers, basically. Like, what is the thing that they notice first? Now, in both cases, light and colors are the only differentiating factor. So in the first black and white photo, you're seeing the light first. Among all the dark that's there, the grassland is dark, the sky is partially dark, and the light is breaking that sky, coming through the sky to the land, grassland. So that's something you see on the first picture, the black and white. But in the second picture, you see that glorious yellow light falling from the sky to the grasslands, green. It's not like a mature grass. It's like still very young grass, very pale green. So those colors, that's the first thing that you might notice. So what I'm trying to say here is, whenever you see a photograph, the first thing you would notice is actually the spot that is of the minority. So if a picture is too dark, like for example this one, this is a photograph of thunder. This is actually a stacked image, but we will discuss that part later. This is an image of photo of thunder, right? It's black and white, and you see a lot of lightnings. Sorry, it's lightning. You see a lot of lightnings going from the sky to the ground, right? So this is something you see even in the black and white photo. But coming to the color photo, you see the color of the lightning. That's something that you see in real life, and you can imagine like, oh, the purple color lightning or dark blue color lightning, right? So these are the things. In the black and white photo, you see the exposure, you see the light that's there, right? So this is something that I use. I set the display to black and white, and then I photograph. And I use the black and white display to set the exposure of the images. We will get to that part later as well. Now, for the colors, yeah, colors don't matter for me because the way I shoot raw. And so I can manipulate the color in post. But I do have something like Fujifilm right here. And this one can take some amazing photos, amazing color photos, which I love. The output from this camera is amazing. So in this particular camera, I have some film simulations that I can choose, and then I can shoot likewise. We will discuss everything later, but yeah, the point here is like in the black and white photos, the exposure is what you notice, the light, the minority part of the entire image. Let's say you photograph something like a very, very calm lake, and there's one pier, and you're on the shore, you're photographing the pier from back the shore. So the pier will be black, the water will be calm and white, and the sky, the horizon will be like thin line of black, and the sky will be bright. So in the entire picture, there are two things that's darker than the sky and water. That's the pier and the horizon. So that's the kind of way that you see black and white photos. You will be attracted, you'll be drawn to the one thing that's minority in the picture. So whenever you shoot black and white, you have to keep that in mind. When you're shooting colors are something that you have to think about. So let's get to the part later. And if you were to look at these images from your devices, there's something that I want you to do. I want you to be critical, as critical as possible on these images. What do you not like it? What do you like it, right? So if you have no clue, there are a few points that you can consider. Is the subject in focus, right? That's the first thing that you need to be critical about. If the subject is exposed enough, right? If the subject is too dark, you wouldn't see anything. Does these photos look natural enough? Are these photos natural, or are these photos like too much edited or too much digital? And does this photo look too digital? Are colors attracting or distracting? Right? These are the points that you will use for your own images whenever you shoot even the smartphone photos. You will be using these criteria to assess, okay, I'm going to take one shot. I'm going to touch the camera. I'm going to take one photo. If that's the case, what are the things that I need to consider, right? I need to make sure the subject is in focus. I need to make sure that the subject is exposed, right? Well, smartphone, it does everything for you. You just need to point and click. But yeah, that's the next level of getting into photography. Smartphone photos, I'm not talking about those. Okay, how about the composition? Right, is the overall photo looking pleasing? Yeah, these are the pointers to consider. Yeah, I have these things so that you can, click and play with it. Exposure. Now we are going into the main topics of photography. Exposure. What do you think is exposure? So to get the right exposure, for example, you're looking at me, there's light on my face, so I'm visible to you. If I'm sitting in a very dark room, of course I will not be visible to you. In that case, the exposure is very low. So exposure, the light is the key to get your subject exposed. Right, so here I have a few examples of good exposure. Here I have an example of overexposed image. You see everything is so bright. It's hard to bring back all the details in the highlight, okay, in the post. Here we have an underexposed image. Here we are looking at a bear, which is like too dark to see. The details from the shadows are all gone. It's all black. So these are not the kind of photos that you might want to take. A good exposure photo is always pleasing. Okay, so that's something you have to remember. Before we move on to the next topic, anybody want to say anything? Like any comments? Okay, by the way, Alissa is sitting behind me, so she will be reading out the comments or chats or whatever. If nothing, then I can move on. Alissa?
Yes, hi.
Hey. Yeah. All right, hope you guys can hear her. All right. So, I don't think there's any chat so far. Yeah, it's a boring topic, initially it's all like it's a known knowledge for most people, but yeah, for the people who don't know, let's continue to talk about it. How digital photography work? So, I'm not going to talk too much about DSLR cameras, film cameras, etc. Actually, film cameras work very close to what the mirrorless cameras work today, how the mirrorless cameras work today. So basically, you can imagine the sensor part to be the film strip. And yeah, otherwise, there's no electronics in film camera. And for the mirrorless camera, everything else behind the sensor is all electronics. And yeah, I'm going to explain each and every single part of it. You need to understand the tools that get you the photograph. So let's try to understand how it works. Basically, the light is entering the lens. So there are two parts for a photo capturing device. One is the lens, other is the camera. Lens is the one that directs the light to the sensor of the camera. And the camera has a few things going on. Like it has a sensor that collects the data and has to process it to create the image, then write it onto the memory card. While this sensor is doing all these things, there is another part in front of the sensor. It's called the shutter. It needs to actuate according to the setting that you have set to get the right exposure. And the lens, it's gathering all the light, but there's a control over there for the photographer. He can control the amount of light entering into the lens. So these three are the constituent base elements of photography, like the exposure control. We call it as, we photographers, right, like the professionals call it as exposure triangle, right? It's called the three elements. The one element from the lens, the aperture, the second element from the camera, the sensor, the third element from the camera is the shutter. With all these three things, the exposure triangle is what we get. Like we get three main controls to control the exposure. Of course, you can add multiple light sources to increase the light falling on the subject. Yeah, that's external control. But on this tool, the camera and the lens combination, this is what you have. So incoming light is actually going into the sensor lens element. From the lens, it's going to converge and diverge inside depending on the arrangement. We will discuss a lot more on the lens, and then the actual light falls onto the sensor, and the shutter shuts the amount of light depending on the shutter speed. So we will discuss, starting with ISO. What is ISO? In a nutshell, ISO is nothing but the voltage rating provided to the sensor. And it's been universally understood as ISO 100, 200, 300. Right from the film days, they have the sensitivity for the film strips. And it's like a digital version of that. So in the camera, every camera, even our smartphones, in the pro mode, you can find these ISO settings. It's the property of the sensor, how much voltage is given. But you have to remember, lower the voltage given to the sensor, that is the lower ISOs, you will get noise-free images, because the exposure that's being generated by the sensor, it's all from the light it gathers, and minimal voltage is given to the sensor from the camera to actually process that image. So this is the reason why high ISOs generally are noisy, right? Here we can see a lot of comparison, by the way. So here I'm starting with the highest ISO my camera can offer. That's A7C2. That was the camera this image is shot with. And you can see it's ISO 25,600. It's a very high number. And we can see a lot of noise on this image. You can just click on these subsequent number. These are called ISO stops. These are one stop. So from the number 25,600 to the next stop, it's 12,800. There are a few other stops that you can go to in 1/3 increment. Like for example, from ISO 12,800 to ISO 16,000 to ISO 20,000, something like that. So you have the middle stops as well. But when you say one stop, this is what it means. These are the numbers for one stop ISOs. So ISO 25,600, 12,800, 6,400, 3,200. You can see from 25,600 to 3,200, you can see a tremendous drop of noise right in the background, especially. Okay, so you can see, you can click and see all the samples. You can actually download these images and see for yourself. And I think if you right click on this and click save image, it will be saved in a very, very high quality. So these are all like original files. Yeah, it's going to load the server a lot, but for this page only, I want to have really good quality images, except for those that I watermarked. Okay. Before we move to the next topic, any questions, any comments? Okay, apparently no. Yeah, this is all known information, right? But yeah, you get to play in this post. Yeah. Next topic is aperture. Aperture is a very interesting topic because whenever we choose a lens, for example, this is a f1.8 lens, right? So let me put it this way. I'm not sure if you can see. Okay, yeah, yeah, very nice. So here, this lens is actually 16 to 35 millimeter G Master 2, and here you can see. Let me, yeah. Okay, let me extend this part. All right. So this is a f2.8 constant aperture lens. It's a zoom lens. While this lens, on the other hand, is a f1.8 fixed aperture prime lens. So what's the difference, right? This is actually brighter. F1.8. This is called F1.8, F by 1.8. This is how aperture is being represented. The lower the number, the brighter it can open. So the lower the number, it can open bigger. The hole can be opening bigger. But if you were to go to f2.8, here, for example, this can go up to f2.8 only. So if I move it, you can see f2.8. Yeah, this is the maximum aperture it can open to. But the other one can open wider. But the lens is so tiny. Why is that? I'll do it this way, yeah. So since I'm having all the cables here, it's kind of messy. Don't bother about the cables for now. So yeah, this is a tiny, tiny lens that can go up to f1.8. If you can see here, the front lens element is so tiny, and even the aperture is so tiny. But here, this is a 16 millimeter f2.8 lens. Look at the size of this lens. Look at the size of the front element, right? So there's a reason, okay, which we will discuss further in the lens section. But for now, you can understand that the lower the number, brighter will be the aperture. And if I were to change it to bigger numbers, like f22, for example, it's going to be very, very dark. So I gave you an example here. I gave you a few examples actually. So here you can see f2.8. I want you to pay attention to the background as well. So f2.8, f4, f5.6. These are again one-stop increments. Okay, the camera is right on my face. Alright, I didn't know that. Anyway, so let me switch the camera. Okay, so here, this is again a series of examples with f5.6, f8, f11, f16, f22. Notice the background. Everything is in focus with f22, while at f2.8, the background is so blurry. I would prefer a blurrier background, but my wife would prefer background something like this. It should be visible, but it's not like too obvious. If everything is visible, it's the smartphone photos. So there are a few things that I will talk about the lens later, but for now, to understand aperture, there are two things you need to consider. One, the depth of field. They call it as depth of field because it's the focal plane. So let's say, for example, this is the plane, right? If the aperture, actually it should be viewed from the side. So for example, here we have our prop, all right? So for our prop here, if you're going to view from the side, a tiny sliver will be the depth of field if the aperture is very wide, if the opening is very wide, which means f number is small, right? The depth of field will be a tiny sliver. But if it were to be a bigger aperture, it's going to be very thick. It's going to have more things in focus. The plane will become thick. So that's the difference of having a wider aperture and a narrower aperture. So aperture plays a very big role in controlling the focal plane. and the amount of light that comes into the camera. So these are the two controls you have with Aperture. Now the third part to this exposure triangle equation is the shutter speed, right? Shutter speed, you can imagine how much, how long the sensor is exposed, right? So before we move on, I want to show you how the shutter looks, okay, so that you get an understanding of how the shutter looks. All right, so I'm glad that I'm having this A7C II, which puts down the shutter and it's going to cover the sensor so that the dust doesn't go through the sensor area. All right, so this is how the shutter looks like. I hope you guys can see it. So this is what is covering the sensor, and I'll just put it back and I'll show you the sensor itself. All right. We will discuss further on what the different sensors are, what are the type of cameras that's there, and which one should be considered for which purpose later. All right. So, but for now, I want you to see this part. All right. So here you can see the sensor itself. It's like completely exposed to the light that's coming from the lens. Right. So all the light is gathered and it's sent to the sensor. Now, that said, let's move on to the next part, shutter speed. How does shutter speed affect photos? So you go to some places, you go to a theme park, for example, you start shooting photos of your kids playing or somebody playing, and you see all shaky photos, right? It's because the shutter speed is low. So here I give you some examples. 1/8000th of a second, okay, it's measured in seconds, basically. And you have this 1/8000th of a second, 1/4000th of a second, 1/2000th of a second in each exposure stop. In this is also one stop. There are some middle points, 1/3 stops as well, but these will be the middle stop. This will be the one stop aperture or shutter speed or ISOs, right? So here I'm starting from the maximum, the fastest shutter the camera can use. I'm using the Sony A7Cii to capture these images again. Notice the background, you have a fan. Guess if the fan is running or not, right? I'm saying that it's running, but it's frozen in time. And you can freeze it with that fast of a shutter speed. You don't have to know how fast the fan is spinning, but you can freeze it with 1/8000th of a second. Hummingbird, for example, you will still see some sort of a wing flap with hummingbird, like motion blur. Yeah, that's the thing with the hummingbird. It's extremely fast. All right, so if you go to 1/2000th of a second, you see a tiny bit of blur in the background scene in the fan. And when you go to 1/250th of a second, you see a lot of blur. You actually see the fan spinning like a disc, right? So this is the thing that you see with the shutter speed. If you were to shoot with slower shutter speeds, you will have the motion blur, and that's why you feel that image is shaky. And you will have to always go to shutter speed of 1/100th or 1/250th of a second for moving subjects. Let's say a person is moving, for street photography even, a person is moving, then you want to capture him, freeze his time, then you will have to use 1/50th or sorry 1/250th of a second. Here, the rule of thumb, there is again a rule of thumb that you can remember, which I don't think I put it here, which I will do it. Okay, so this is an evolving post. I will keep adding new stuff. I will keep arranging stuff in a way that it's easier to understand, right? So the rule of thumb when it comes to shutter speed is actually to shoot 1 by twice the focal length of the lens that you're using. So let's say, for example, here we have 16 to 35 millimeters. So if I'm going to use this lens at 28 millimeters, right? If I'm going to use this lens at 28 millimeters, my focal length, I want it to be, sorry, my shutter speed, I want it to be at least 1/56th of a second, 1/56, 1 divided by 5/6 of a second. And these cameras, they don't go to that kind of a shutter speed. They have some kind of a whole increment. So the shutter speed that it can go to is 1/60th of a second instead. So I would set at least 1/60th of a second. But usually you can get away with getting sharp images with 1 bifocal length of a second. So for example, if I were to be in 35 millimeters, and if I'm going to shoot something at 35 1/35th of a second, the image would be still sharp. Okay, below that it will be a bit blurry. For example, if you are shooting at 35 millimeters, and if you're shooting at a shutter speed of, let's say, 1/8 of a second, then the image will be blur. So these are the things that you need to remember. One more thing that you can say is that, like, let's say for example, if you're using 16 millimeters, your shutter speed is going to be like, it can be very low. So 1/16th of a second also you can get like sharp images. And this is a 11 millimeter lens, right? So for this 11 millimeter lens, you can go up to 1/20th or 1/10th of a second. So you can go that low. So wider the field of view, sorry, the wider the focal length, you can still have some slower shutter speeds. And also, of course, it depends on the aperture. It's a triangle, remember? Oops. It's a triangle, remember? So one end, one vertex, we have the ISO, the other vertex we have the aperture, and the other vertex we have the shutter speed. So these three form to give you a proper exposure. The idea is to get a proper exposure, and that's why we need to always change some of these values so that we get a proper exposure. And again, exposure is measured on the sensor. So how much light is falling, what the sensor deems to be a lower EV. So it's measured in EV. So it's the amount of light that's falling on the sensor with the relative standard values that's preset into the camera. Depending on that, it will show on the camera if it's like positive EV or negative EV. So let me try to show it to you. Any comments so far? Any chat?
No.
Okay. So here, what you're seeing right now is it's manual mode. MM is manual mode, and here it's blinking -2 EV, which means it's saying, hey, it's too dark. Try to increase the brightness, right? So that's what it's trying to say. So you need to bump up some of these three so that you can get a proper exposure. All right. So let's move on to the next part. Okay. Color. Okay. Color is something that it's very important thing that you need to remember. Like I said, the purple has to look purple on your photo. The red has to look red on your photo. The green has to look green on your photo. So what is the main part from the camera that defines the color of the image is actually the white balance. Okay, so here, let me bring this up. If you see, the white balance is measured in terms of Kelvin. Imagine like temperature Kelvin. So it's like if you go higher number, it'll be warmer. If you go lower number, it's going to be cooler. So 2500 Kelvin is actually very cold. It's blue color. And 9900 Kelvin is actually very, very warm. What happens here if something were to go wrong with the white balance is that you miss out on the remaining spectrum of colors. Let's say, for example, here we go to 4000 Kelvin. You get purples, you get shades of brown, you get some shades of blue here, which is non-existent here. There's no shade of blue. It's all like red and orange. And when it comes to blue, there's no shade of red. It's all like blue and purple, magenta even. So this is what we get out of setting up wrong white balance. So this cannot be recovered in some cases. So make sure your white balance is on spot. The way we can do it on your camera is actually using some cards like these. These are called gray cards. Okay. especially this one. This is called gray card. You can set your white balance to a neutral gray card like this, and you can get a proper white balance every time. Right, so there's a camera setting in there, which I will show you again. So this part is going to be theoretical. So color is again important. Higher the white balance value, warmer the image gets, and lower the white balance, you get cooler images. Okay, composition. And this is something that I mentioned earlier. How to draw attention to the image, to the audience. So here, image one, what do you see? It's like a white dot on a black background. And for image two, you see red dot immediately. That's what is drawing your attention to, right? So this is exactly what I explained earlier. And here, how do you compose the image? I'm going to compose this image for its light. So wherever I see the rays, excuse me. So wherever I see the rays, light rays, I get everything in the frame. And I make sure the horizon is parallel to the border of the image. It's not at the angle, right? It's going to be like disruptive. I don't like that framing as well. So there are certain rules that you can follow. You can check out internet for how to compose your image. There are several rules, but I do follow a few. So whenever we turn on the camera, okay, so I set, okay, you can set the grid lines to be, oh, I think I can show you this here. So here you can see this Pocket 3 is filming me, and actually, yeah. So here you can see the Pocket 3 is filming me, and on the Pocket 3 you can see the grid lines. So these grid lines will help you to actually set the person where you want to keep the subject between the grid lines, right? So that will help you to compose the image very accurately. Okay, so that's something that you can keep in mind. And here I'm making sure that this bottom line is actually on the bottom quarter of the image. So it's all parallel to that grid line. Now for the next image, it's called leading lines. Composition for subjects based on geometry. So all these leading lines is actually drawing the attention of the viewers to that particular place, right? So that's something you can think about whenever you're composing the image. So here, from here, I'm just taking this one corner, one vertex, and then I'm drawing the viewer's attention to the stone and to the beach. So it's something that you can remember. Rule of thirds, again, going back to that grid, you see the intersection points and you place the subject's eye on those particular points and you get some amazing images. So this is something I want to show you again for one more thing, eye level photos. Whenever you're shooting birds or animals or even people, sometimes you shoot with eye level and you get some amazingly intimate photos. Yeah, so that's something you can keep in mind. Here in this photo, you can see the subject is eye level and also it's symmetric. Symmetric is something that can work for composition, right? For contrast, we see a lot of dark and white areas. It's so contrasty. So the viewer is drawn to that point where there's light coming from the sky to the trees through the cave. So that's something you can think about. So this is a beautiful image. We can see a bunch of leaves and we are seeing the waterfall through the bunch of vegetation over there. So this is something that you can think about. You are immediately drawn to this waterfall. I'm going to code this image for a few other things. Okay, so you can see the shutter speed. When it's slow enough, this is a handheld image. If the shutter speed is slow enough, you get this amazingly smooth, silky water. But it's not silky enough to call it like, okay, silky water. It's still a flowy water because you can see all the droplets You can see the spaces between each long droplet. So it's still not silky enough. We will discuss that further. So composition wise, it's very important to understand and practice composition. For me, as a landscape photographer, I find it the most challenging genre, genre, most challenging type of photography ever. Sports, not really. Today's technology, autofocus performance of most cameras are amazing, so for sports is not that difficult anymore. When it comes to events, weddings, yeah, you need to be creative, you need to plan ahead, so it's not that difficult anymore. Wildlife, yeah, it is difficult to some extent, but it's not still as difficult as landscape photographers. Landscape photographers, they need to find the one thing that differentiates their photos among all other photographers who are right there with them taking the same place, right? So that's a challenging part. It's very difficult to differentiate, to get the unique factor for the photographer to become that oomph, right? So yeah, here this is an image again, compose for light. Okay, so I think we have covered this part. Now moving on. The next aspect you need to remember is actually the focus. The subject is in focus or not. Let's say you start with the exposure triangle, you expose the image correctly, you take care of every single detail, low ISO noise, fast enough shutter speed, and you have brighter enough aperture. Then you come to composition, you compose the image very neatly. It's so symmetrical and eye level, whatever, right? It's so contrasty. And then if it's not in focus, okay, again, you can play with the slide here. If it is not in focus, it's waste of time, right? It's all doing everything, putting in your effort is such a waste of time. So always make sure your subject is in focus, like this. This is actually a very nice photo. Yeah, it's a tabletop studio photo, but yeah, why not? So yeah, you can still play with these slides to see how blurriness affects the image. What I would do is actually stack them to create a much more beautiful photo, but that's for the photography techniques, which we will discuss later. File formats, the next part. So let's say you have set the camera to focus on the subject properly, you have focused on the subject. Now, you have set the file format to JPEG low quality. Unfortunately, you touch the camera, something happens, something goes wrong. So, if something were to happen, and if you set the file format wrong, you will get all grainy, like banding images like this. For example, you can see this is a beautiful waterfall. You can see all the silky water flowing from the top to bottom. You can see the beautiful blue sky, the green vegetation, the sun just shining through this water, and the yellow light. But the image itself is all pixelated because of low resolution or whatever format image that you have chosen, right? So that is a failure. You need to focus on these when you export the image. Make sure you export the image properly with high quality, then you can upload it somewhere to resize the image. So we will discuss more on this later when we discuss the cameras and how to use them. But for now, you can see that straight off the image JPEG, you cannot do much, right? I try to reduce the highlights, increase the shadows to get more dynamic view of this image, JPEG, but not much can be done. But if you were to shoot in RAW, look at how well the image looks after editing. Just a few tweaks and then you get this image. Yeah, this photo. It's such a great thing shooting in RAW. You get to get the entire detail what the sensor has collected for you in the raw images, which you can later manipulate to process it to JPEG images, like I did here, right? So, what a difference, right? Here it's blue and pale and gloomy. Here it's so vibrant, golden, right? So these are the kind of things you can do with raw photos. Make sure you shoot in raw and then manipulate in JPEG, or maybe you shoot in raw and JPEG together, so you get best of both worlds. Sometimes you just want to take photos and post it on Instagram or Facebook. In that case, you can shoot JPEG. But RAWs are really helpful if you are too much, not too much, you're if you're into editing. So this is an example for that. Okay. And we will discuss further regarding the file formats later. And if you want to understand, if you're owning a A6700, or if for the matter of fact, if you're using any mirrorless camera, just click on that link over here, which will take you to the video that I have made. And it's about A6700's RAW and JPEG modes, which is a very elaborate, detailed video how you should choose each and every single setting. So I think it's a video worthwhile watching to understand different file formats. Okay. Before we get into the interesting topic of photography tools, any questions? Any chat? Any comment?
No.
No? How many people are there?
Three.
Three. Nice, nice. Guys, yeah, say hi. Okay. Anyway, let's make it interactive. I hope you guys are on this page and you're like playing with all the sliders. I try to make it as interactive as possible, having this virtual session. I cannot like give my camera to you and ask you to look at the photos, but this is something I can do, something within my power. Right, so yeah, here, after the file formats, now is the interesting part. Okay, so let's talk about cameras. Why we use cameras like these, right? Why do we use cameras like these, big, monstrous cameras, than our smartphones? Smartphones are so much easier to use, isn't it? Like you just like turn it on, click, and point it to something, and then click. It does everything. It autofocuses. It sets the exposure. It sets the color for you. It's almost like it even adds some AI processing to enhance the image. So why not? Right? It's just not natural, in my opinion, and I will never be happy with a small sensor photo. Here, for example, here you have a comparison between Fujifilm X106 versus the Galaxy S24 Ultra. Here you are seeing two images. On the left, we have the Galaxy S24 Ultra's similar kind of field of view image. What I can see is a lot of banding from, it's like concentric banding right from the sun to the shadows. Sun is the brightest part of the image. From there to shadows, I can see a lot of banding. This banding happens when the color sampled to the subsequent color level is actually the sampling rate is much lower. For example, if to be precise, like each subsequent pixels when it processes, this is the downside of actually computational photography. When the subsequent pixel information is obtained, it cannot go and sample in the middle. If it were to roll very slowly, if it can gather each and every single values from the highlight part to the shadow part, it's fine. But it cannot, unfortunately. It's the discrete values. To make the file smaller, it even compresses, subsamples these images and creates more banding. And that's why posting any smartphone photos on the internet introduces more banding and it becomes very ugly very fast, especially the ones with skies and a lot of colors. That's exactly what we see here. Whereas, look at the um, yeah, X106 photo. Here we can see a beautiful roll off from the highlights to the shadows, and I don't see any banding at all. Yes, I do see some noise, but it's the filmic grain that we get from this camera. It's so natural. This is exactly why I use large sensor cameras. Okay, here we have another example. This is a shot at a restaurant. We can see how much more beautiful a mundane picture looks here. So it's just a whatever tree, plastic tree placed on the table, and we can see it's such a mundane picture, but it looks so much more beautiful than a smartphone photo. So this is a smartphone photo. Probably you can tell it just by looking at it. It's so obvious, but yeah. If you ask Alissa, she would say she liked the image on the left, but yeah, because more things are in focus. Here we can see another example why larger sensor cameras produces better image. So here you might think that on the left we see vibrant colors, so the left image is much better. But on the right, you have to notice a few things. So on the left, if we zoom in, we can see a lot of artifacts in the shadows. So the image falls down very fast. So wherever the image cannot identify what values to put in, it puts some garbage value. It's like digital version of just filling up the blanks, some gibberish. And that's exactly what it does, introducing a lot of artifacts in this shadow region. Just by looking at it, you will never know. I'm like zooming in on the screen to tell you that, okay, it's still garbage. While the other one, X106, we can see a lot of shadow detail. It's so natural how you would look in real life. So that's the difference of using a bigger sensor camera. So, and also in the highlights, you can still recover some of the values, all right? And yeah, let's move on. So this is the reason why you want to use the bigger sensor camera. Now, tools and expenses. So what's the cost of buying a bigger sensor camera? It's a lot, basically. But before that, let me drink some water. Just okay, guys, I'm back. Oops. Okay, guys, I'm back. So, my Fujifilm overheated, so I'm gonna change to my Sony. And let me just quickly look at it. Yeah, so these live streams are only possible until nothing overheats, basically. If everything gets overheated, then I have no choice. I have to cancel it midway. Anyway, the a lot of values are actually pretty bad. Okay, so let me pick it up. Alright, so this is the camera. The autofocus should be good. because this is a much better camera, but I need to turn it on. All right. Um, tu- tu- okay. Alrighty. So here we have a camera, right? Tools. So when we talk about tools that actually help photographer achieve the photos, we are talking about camera plus lens, right? Not only camera plus lens. We are talking about a lot more things actually. So here we have camera plus lens plus what about the filters, right? We need to use some sort of filters. So some lens need to have something called filters. So we need to get filters, but that's for the lens expense. Sometimes you need to place the camera on a tripod. So you need a tripod like this. So you need a tripod, you need a fluid head or ball head, you need a base plate to mount the camera on the tripod. So something like this. So you need this to mount it on the tripod or this ball head. Right? So you need something like this, then this need to go on the tripod. So all these things need to be there. Sometimes maybe you don't need the cage, but I need the cage because I do filming, travel filming. So yeah, a cage helps sometimes. So all these add to expense. This, that, tripod, filter, and there's a huge list of things that goes into expenses. Travel camera bag, additional battery, whatnot, right? And a cage, remote. Sometimes you might need a remote as well. So, but luckily, the Sony users they have something called a creator app. So the creator app actually acts like a remote from your smartphone. So that's an advantage for Sony users. But for most users, they might want to use a remote, external remote, and like that again adds to expenses. So before we discuss any further, I want to tell you like how we can choose your camera. So let's say you haven't purchased a camera, but you are looking into purchasing a camera because you're interested in photography, right? So what are the things that you need to consider before buying a camera? First, you need to understand what is your requirement, right? So if your requirement is primarily casual shooting, then you should be good with 24 megapixels, more than enough. I used a Nikon Z6 II, and it was more than sufficient for my use case as hobbyist. So if it's okay for me, I think it should be more than enough. But let's say you're not happy with this 24 megapixels, then you might probably want to look into 33 megapixels Sony A7C II or A7R or R series. So all these things are like high megapixel cameras. But you wouldn't want to use it, right? So if you're starting out, those are not the cameras for you. Those are like professional cameras. Most people are content with 26 megapixel from A6700. This camera has 26 megapixels and most people are really okay with it. Okay. Now, to the second point, the sensor size. When we talk about sensor size, see, earlier I showed the A7C2 size, but this is a tiny bit shorter sensor size. To be precise, it's like 1.5 times a crop sensor. So, is the sensor having any negative issues? Actually, not. Okay, this sensor is perfectly alright to work with. I have two cameras of this kind of sensors, like crop sensors, which are producing perfectly fine images, like you saw earlier. Fujifilm X106 is actually a crop sensor camera and it performs perfectly fine. A6700 also produces some amazing images. So sensor size, if you're into photography, I would recommend you to go at least APS-C size. Please do not go below that, like micro four thirds camera size, because you will end up getting a lot of stuff which you will want to sell in the future. So no micro four thirds part. But some people they do like going micro four thirds, but I would recommend against it. Dynamic range. So when we talk about dynamic range, it's very important that you understand that dynamic range and sensor size goes hand in hand. The bigger the sensor size, bigger is the pixel area, and the dynamic range will be higher for those images. Why? Because the pixels are getting maximum light from the sensor itself. So it's totally worth it if you're into dynamic range. So what is dynamic range? Even before we go into further details, it's like you have shot an image. For example, I will take an example. You have shot this image. Now you see the dark clouds here. These are okay, dark clouds, but it's become darker when you edit. These are highlights. In this highlight area, you don't see any detail at all, but in the post, I was able to bring out a lot of cloud detail from the highlights. And from the shadows, you see this dome is completely dark here. Yeah, it's like pitch dark. But if I were to edit, I can bring out all the glorious blue color out of this dome. So that's the advantage of having the dynamic range. You tend to bring out all the details out of the shadows. You can bring out all the details out of the highlights and still retain the integrity of the photo. So that's what it means to have good dynamic range photos. And again, for this one, since it was this waterfall picture was like a very, very early morning, the entire lower section of this waterfall is black in the original picture. But while editing, I brought out all the details from the shadows and still it looks very pleasant. So this looks natural and I would say it's a wonderful, wonderful image. I was showing this, right? Okay, moving on. Yeah, that's what it means to have a really good dynamic range. File compressions. When we talk about file compressions, most people are really aversive towards raw images. They think it's like too much to edit, and then like just stick with JPEGs, which are fine for them if it's working out fine, but I tend to edit my images to get the maximum out of it. When I go to some places, I don't think I will go there again. So I want to get as much as detail as possible so that I happen to play with it very often. So that's something you can remember before thinking about file compressions. Try lossless compress modes from any camera. If you are thinking about going to buy a camera, so think about having lossless compress mode, raw. If it is JPEG, just go for the same version, like fine, extra fine, something like that. They tend to have more information for JPEGs. Usually, in these cases, what happens is like the raw images will have 14-bit color information, and JPEGs will have 8-bit color information, which means you lose a lot of information already, and that's also another reason why you see a lot of banding in very bright blues or oranges from dark areas to bright areas. It's because of the sampling of JPEG images. In RAW, you get 14-bit colors. It's 2 to the power 14. That many zeros. So that many amount of color information you got, like 16 billion or something. So yeah, imagine reducing that to 2 to the power 8. You get a lot of, loss of data. So that's something you need to consider. In-body image stabilization. I don't think I really care about in-body image stabilization for photos, but for videos, I definitely do. So that's something you need to consider. Autofocus, yeah. So Sony cameras nowadays are dominating the market, second to Canon, I think. But Canon cameras, they have very important issue. They lack good dynamic range. So I would stick with Sony cameras and get really good dynamic range and really good photos and very sharp, accurately focused photos instead of getting some blurred, yeah, half-baked photos. So, yeah, that's something to remember. Ergonomics and buttons. Okay, when we talk about ergonomics and buttons, there are two cameras that I want to bring your attention to. So this is a camera. We'll put it up a bit. Okay. So here we have a camera with a very nice grip. Okay, you can hold it for the entire day and your hand wouldn't pain. The power button is right on your fingertip, so you can just flick it and then shoot the photo. Okay, I just realized that I haven't turned on the other screen, so let me turn it on. Alright, so this is what I was talking about. This is A6700, and you can see the ergonomics, the grip part of this camera is so good. You can hand hold it all day. Now the next part is actually the power button, which is placed right at your fingertips. You can flick it open and click the shutter button to shoot photos. Now there is another custom 2 button, which is placed right above, which you can click to activate some features. One thing I don't like about this custom button placement is actually here. It's very difficult to press this button. And here we have another custom button. We have all the dials. I come from using a lot of cameras with joysticks, and lack of joystick is actually kind of frustrates me. But yeah, that's what we have for this capable camera. Now the second camera I want to show is actually this one. This is Fujifilm X100VI. This camera is extremely capable for the size. Alright, so here, this is a tiny form factor, but this one has got like 40 megapixels. Unbelievable. Yeah, and it's got the ergonomics of a handle, like ergonomics of a remote. You can lose it anytime. But with this grip, it's very convenient to hold. The most attractive part of this camera is actually the exposure control at your fingertips. You have the shutter speed control over here at this fingertip. And here you have ISO control over here, and you can pull it up and pull it down. Right, like this. And here on the lens, we have aperture controls. You can see here I can change the aperture. And here on top, we have something called a hybrid viewfinder. Hybrid viewfinder, it actually shows what's displayed, what are the camera controls inside, which is fantastic implementation for a camera of 40 megapixels. So this is the reason why this is our everyday travel camera. But this cannot change the lens. This autofocus is very poor. The ergonomics is not that great. So you need to consider all these factors before purchasing your camera. And when it comes to the next part, that is the weight. This camera weighs nothing. So the Fujifilm camera weighs nothing, literally nothing. But the Sony, depending on the lens, it will weigh heavier. So the hierarchy for the weight is actually the full frame cameras are heavier than the APS-C size cameras with the lenses, and that is heavier than the fixed lens cameras like the Fuji X100 So you need to think about the weight. You need to have a pretty good amount of calculation for the weight. So what I did was back then, I actually formed a table. Let me bring it up. Okay, so I actually made this table where we can see a combination package. Right. So you see a lot of combinations that you can choose from. Let's say you have a camera, you have a lens, you can choose which brand camera you want, which brand lens you want, and you can choose which model camera, let's say for example FX3, and you're going to choose a lens something like 20mm f2.8. You can see the weight right away. So this is something I did back then. Yeah, of course the pricing is not okay. Pricing is also accurate. You can see. Yeah, this is something that I did in the past, which I think I haven't completed yet, but I plan to complete and upload on the website as a web app so that anybody can get benefited out of it. It's an amazing way to plan your purchase depending on your needs, right? So you can choose the criteria of weight, the criteria of focal length, or the models or the camera body, and you get the price right away. So that's something I have done in the past, which is not necessary, but yeah, why not research before purchase? Frame rates. It's very important that you consider the frame rates of shooting for photos. So for example, we have we have here A7C2, and this one maybe like I don't know how much, maybe 10 frames per second. It can shoot 10 frames per second, but I'm not too sure about it. It's like a street photo camera. But on the other hand, we have the A6700, which can shoot up to 11 frames per second and continuously, and it cannot fill the buffer. So there's something called buffer when we talk about high frame rates, which I will discuss later during the wildlife section. And the next part is the SD card. Okay, all these cameras have SD cards slot, but some cameras may have two of them. Two of them better than one? Yeah, if you're a professional photo shooter. But if you're a casual photo shooter, just one is more than enough. I've been having this camera since it was released, and I'm just rocking with one SD card. No problems at all, right? So next is the viewfinder. How do you find the viewfinder? So for me, viewfinder is not a problem because I mostly use the screen here. But for some people, apparently, the viewfinder is an issue. And if you're a person who is not into cheap viewfinders, you should never buy some cameras like this. So yeah, these are cheap cameras with cheap viewfinders. Next part is actually the weather sealing. Yeah, make sure you get all the products weather sealed. It need to come from the factory. You cannot weather seal it outside, but there are some rain covers to protect your cameras and lenses. So if it comes with the camera, it's fine. But if it doesn't come with the camera, then yeah, you have no choice then. What other features that do you think a camera should have? Is something like web streaming. So, for example, I'm live streaming from my A7C2, and it's kind of getting hot there, but it's not too hot to the point that I need to stop this live stream. And I'm displaying my A6700 to my A7C2, which is very nice. And let's move on. Like I said, the expenses will be a lot, right? So the cameras, then the tripod, lenses, base plate, cage, SD card, additional battery. When it comes to SD card, you need to also remember that you are going to shoot some fast buffer speed, and you need to have this fast write speed memory card. So this is SanDisk Extreme Pro 300 megabits per second, And okay, it says 300 megabytes per second, 128 GB card, which is okay for most people. Okay, let's take a short break actually. My voice is getting very, very dry. Any doubts so far? Any questions? Anything that need to be covered?
No questions.
All right, I'm back. Just moisturized my throat. All right, so lenses. Okay, this is the biggest expense for any camera. So you will never be content with just one lens because one lens cannot solve your problem. There are a few one lens solutions for Sony users, like for example 24 to 240 millimeter lens from Sony. But the problem with that lens is that it's a variable aperture lens, which means that the more you zoom in, the aperture changes from whatever it was in the wide end to the tele end. It will become very, very closed. So the variable aperture lenses, no, no for me, except this one. So this is a variable aperture lens. I think I need to do this for this. Yeah. So this is a variable aperture lens. Except for this lens, I wouldn't buy anything else with variable aperture because this is worth it. Honestly, this is a Canon that this is not a Canon. I mean, this is a Canon like bazooka that I would rock any day, anytime for bird photography. This is going from 200 to 600 millimeters and is exceptionally sharp. When we talk about lenses, what to consider before buying, I have a few things that I want to say. But before that, I'm going to set up the camera. Okay, so I will let you see this process. Okay, so since I'm live streaming, these things come out really, really bad, honestly. So whoever is going to watch this live stream later, I hope they have the patience to look at me changing the lenses, taking a break. I hope you have all the patience in the world just to listen to what I have to say. Alright, so what I'm doing here is I'm changing from wide angle lens to ultra wide angle lens. So here it was 35 millimeter f1.8 lens. From that to 15 millimeter lens. So it's going to reduce some weight and it's going to help us see what I'm talking about. So this is the A6700, which doesn't have a base plate, which is bad. Okay, so let me make use of whatever we have. Alright. Okay, let me switch the... Alright, so we got the feed. As well as streaming. Okay. All right. I hope we have the feed. Do we? Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, no, no. Okay. All right, now we got the feed. Good. So, here it's set to manual focus for some reason. Alrighty. This A6700 is one of the fastest autofocusing camera that I have seen in the past. Alright, so let me quickly put it up. So when I said that it's going to add a lot of cost, this is what I mean. So you need a lot of base plates, attachments, quick couplers, etc., 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 to get everything ready, which I kind of don't agree with. Okay, all right, I think now you have the scene. All right, okay, let me move myself a bit away. All right, I'm here, and let's talk lenses. I want to start with focal length. So let's see what focal lengths we have here. Okay, so this is 16 to 35 millimeter lens. What it has to offer is actually the wide to standard zoom. All right, so this is clearly very wide. Let me bring it here. 16 is extremely wide for those who underestimate the focal length. 16 is actually very, very wide. To put things into perspective, the 11 millimeter for Sony A6700 is actually 16.5 in full frame perspective. Like that's a lot. It's a lot wider, in my opinion. So 11 is you may think that 11 is wider, right? So but actually not. This is made for APS-C sensor camera, a smaller sensor camera like A6700. Whereas this one, the G Master 2, is made for full frame sensor camera, and it starts from 16 to go to 35. F1.8 in full frame terms is actually f2.7. You have to multiply everything by 1.5 factor if you were to convert to APS-C terms. So the 11 millimeter is 16.5 millimeter f2.7 full frame equivalent, while this one is actually there is no conversion because this already is a full frame. And this is like a zoom lens with f1 2.8, not much difference between f2.7 and f2.8. So this is going to be a much more beneficial product for you in very long run. This may be the only thing you may carry. So this is one of the lens that I highly recommend. And we do have somewhat of a portrait lens. This is 35 millimeter f1.8, not quite 1.2 or 1.4, but it's 1.8, which is totally fine, especially for talking head videos. But the problem with this lens is like it exhibits a lot of lens flaws like chromatic aberration, it's not as sharp, and it has some sort of weather sealing, but it lacks a lot of weather sealing compared to the G Master. And the autofocus is okay in my opinion. It's not fast. It's a 12 years old lens, so I can't expect much from this lens. Then chromatic aberrations, yes, it's there. Distortions, yeah, to some extent, but not even visible. Uh, len lens breathing, yeah, maybe. I'm not sure, but yeah, nobody care about the lens breathing from such an expensive lens. It's not what I would say. There is something called lens compensation built into these cameras, which can compensate for the lens breathing. So that's something very smart going on in these cameras. Okay, parfocal zooms, which are also okay. Um, I think all of these, the newer generation cameras are parfocal. Okay, yeah. Let me explain what is parfocal bit before we move on. So let's say, for example, you're zooming in, right? You're manually focusing. So, for example, if you zoom in, the focus plane actually shifts. So let's say here is the focal plane when it is zoomed in all the way, but when you zoom out, the focal plane may shift a tiny bit. Yeah, so that's what is called like non-parfocal lens, non-parfocal zoom lenses. But if you were to not shift the focal plane at all during the zoom, then it's called parfocal lens. And I think there are only very few parfocal lenses, especially for videos. This is for video users. But yeah, it's a difference, and yeah, I decided to put it in. Buttons and switches on the lens. Yeah, it's so obvious, isn't it? So these are the buttons and switches on the lens. How much do we need? I don't think I ever use any of the functions from the lenses. For example, this is the focus hold button, and here we have autofocus manual focus switch as well. I don't use it at all. I don't use them at all, and sometimes it could be restricted with the cage. So yeah, I just manipulate everything using the sensor and the camera. Okay, moving to the next point. Filter thread. Yeah, one more important point is when you buy any lens, what happens is like it has the front element. Sometimes it so happens that the filter thread of the front element is so impossible because the front element is like too bulging out. So in those cases, yeah, forget filter thread at all. But here, on the contrary, this one is not bulging out, so they have given us like a 82 millimeter UV light. Yeah, which I kind of use actually. So that's about it for now. Let's take a short break. Any questions?
No.
Alright, guys, I'm back. In a few minutes, we will move on to photography techniques where I'll be discussing wildlife, events, stacking, a lot of photography techniques. So stay tuned. Oh, I did click the wrong thing. Just hold on. Okay, yeah, here. So the next part is the photography technique. So wait for it. Just hold on. I have to wake up myself because I was sleep talking, unfortunately. I'm so sorry. I did not sleep all night. I was working on this website. But yeah. Anyway, once again, reminding you to click on this website, go into that. I'm not collecting any details at all, unless you want to comment something negative. Yeah, but yeah, I'm not collecting any details for any nefarious purposes. Everything is just for me to reply to you if you were to comment in my post. But this is actually something that you need to think about, and just go in there, use the examples. The website is tech.alissaj.com/art of photography with hyphens. And once you're there, like, you get to play with all the slides and stuff. So something very intuitive that I have created, which is in my opinion, it's very beautiful for you guys to play with if you're especially beginners. Thank you, my wife. Yeah, so Alyssa has just got me coffee and she's monitoring the comments as well. So thanks, Alyssa.
Oh, we have one comment. Okay, a question.
Mm,
Would a 1.2 aperture lens be
mm,
the best for low light on A6700?
mm.
Looking for a new lens and
Okay.
want to try and get the best lens for low light on an A6700.
Yes, definitely. F1.2 lens is actually a very great lens. The Viltrox F1.2 27 millimeters was something that I was having earlier, which I sold for this 15 millimeter lens, whatever you're watching here. So, okay, which is actually mounted on the lens. So, oh yeah, I can show you. Yeah. So I replaced my 27 millimeter for this 15 millimeter because 27 millimeter f1.2 lens was extremely heavy to hold for a long time. But I can show you some videos. You can check out this channel. Let me quickly go up. Here, for navigation purpose, you can just click this yellow arrow up and it goes to the top. And yeah, here you can see the can go to the main page, go to videos, and it will take you to our channel. And in this channel especially, I have, okay, let me switch the view. Yeah, so in this channel, you can see at least 20 videos are made using that A6700 plus 27 millimeter f1.2 combination. For example, if you look at this one, right? Videos, recent videos. Yeah, you should check this out. So this is 27 millimeter on A7C2 versus 35 millimeter. If you check out this video, you will understand like what is the field of view, how fast the autofocus is, and for this low light test, this is ISO 12800 on Sony A6700. So this is a must video for you to check out if you're interested in 27 millimeter f1.2 lens. Absolutely fantastic performer, in my opinion, but unfortunately, the only two downsides I would say for that lens is the weight and slow autofocus for videos. Photos, it's still doable. Okay. All right. When it comes to low light capability of A6700, I think it performs really well, in my opinion.
He said, gotcha, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, let's move back to the tech website. Yeah, I'm still building up this website to have like full-fledged features, but right now it's still in the beginning stage. So I remember where we left off was this part, photography techniques. So yeah, um, I think whatever we have discussed so far is like catered towards the basics, right? Like all the beginners who are into photographers, into photography, trying to see what they can do with their cameras. Sometimes we are interested in taking some photos like this, but we immediately tend to take some random rubbish. So, yeah, I mean, I started from there. Yeah, I know the journey. Yeah, but now I think I'm taking decent enough photos that I can comment on how you can take photos, good photos like I do. So that's something you can think about. always the okay, going back to the previous topic, sorry. A few things. When you're, yeah, I was a bit sleepy before, but yeah, a few things I forgot to mention is that whenever we are trying to purchase our tools for photography, these are just tools. Please don't have any sort of personal attachment for these tools. They work for you or they don't. That's it. Only two ways. If they don't hesitate to replace it in the beginning stage when right when the product is still ripe. uh, you could make a mistake just keeping that product just so you purchased it. It's a very bad decision. So these are very expensive tools. These can end up being very expensive. The entire hobby can become very expensive. But if you plan on a long run to be a photographer, these can be like a way out into the world of reminiscing, like the time traveling thing that I mentioned earlier. So that's something you can think about in the future. There are a few birds. The reason why I picked this spot is to show you in real time how to shoot wildlife, birds and stuff. Uh, we are actually sitting in front of pigeon and we have the tele lens. We're going to do that in a bit. And so, yeah, you will understand the challenges of a wildlife photographer taking the tele lens and trying to shoot some birds, especially handheld. Right. Today we're going to use a monopod, but yeah, I will explain. Right. So moving to the part, yeah, I did not mention about low light and all, which was covered in the exposure part. Kind of. I don't get too depth into in depth into the menu system, but if you want, I can have a follow-up session on the A6700 and the A7C2's menus. Right. That can be a separate video, but yeah. Here I want to start discussing about a few photography techniques. Starting with the eye level. Whenever we are having this moment, right, when you shoot a photo eye level with any people, animals, or birds, you tend to get intimate with them. It's something that you can always, always, always consider shooting. So you get low. Okay, you get the camera low, you go low, shoot at eye level. So this is beautiful lambs just chewing on grass, and it's one of my favorite photos. They are just cute. And this next picture, this is I think it's harpy eagle. Not harpy eagle. Harpy eagle is like the largest of the eagle. This is some sort of eagle. Yeah, this was on a very, very dark, gloomy day. I managed to bring out all the details from Nikon D500. Like I said, I remember every single one of the photos, when it was taken, how it was taken, where it was taken. So, yeah, this was on a safari ride. We were driving on a safari, and this bird just happened to sit across the lake where we were expecting some tigers to come out for the water. So, yeah, which we did not see tiger, but we happened to see this eagle. Very nice eagle though. And eye level again. Make sure you get the eye level even for the birds. Next we have the long exposure shots. So challenges with the long exposure shots is that whenever you try it, you don't know where to stop. So for example, you set the shutter speed to this is I think uh, tenth or one second shutter speed. This is a handheld image. Panasonic G9 Mark II can have amazing image stabilization, and so this image stabilization allowed me to take handheld photos of flowing waterfall like this, and it's fantastic in my opinion. It allowed me to do that. But the problem is, it's not as good as the ones with the silky water. I would have preferred more silkier water. So I would go a bit beyond, like 2 or 3 seconds to get that flow in one line, one drop, like single line falling to the water. And that's something that I enjoy looking at. And you can stop there, or you can go further and make it like too misty. So too misty is bad, misty is good, flowy is good, and this semi flowy is not that good. and make sure we need to focus on this entire area, this waterfall, on the rocks, on the leaves, on the vegetation, on even the foreground. Having a foreground would have helped a lot for this picture. Like I said, landscape is one of the most difficult type of photography. I think it's for me. So being at that location, thinking of some creative aspects is the challenge, and being unique is another big challenge among all the photographers who are right there with you taking all the photos. Yeah, so that's something that you can try, long exposure shots, and always know when to stop. Otherwise, you'll get overboard. And one more thing to consider for long exposure shots is something called ND filter, neutral density filter. So this is a neutral density filter. Okay, so I will just quickly explain this part. I will change the view. Okay. This is a neutral density filter. Okay. So what it does is to reduce the light that's going into the lens. So basically it attaches to the lens like this, and you can see the light is immediately dropping. I'm going to show you half and half. Right on the top you see the highlights are getting a lot of details, and you can turn it. This is a variable neutral density filter, which means you can turn it to make it darker, or turn it the other way to make it brighter. So this is something that's very, very important for slow shutter speed. So what you do here is actually you insert it in front of the lens, then you increase the aperture so that everything gets in focus, and also reduce the shutter speed so that you get enough light into the camera. But the shutter speed will go very, very high. Oh, sorry, very, very low, as in like 1 second or 5 seconds or 10 seconds sometimes, which is fine in my opinion. You get some misty looking photos. So you can use for water, for lakes, for rivers, etc. You get some amazing photos. But I love to use these on clouds for most of the time. The moving of clouds, especially with ND filters, are amazing. You see this part over here, this clouds. Okay, let me move this up a bit. Yeah. So in this waterfall picture, you see all the clouds here? This is actually partially flowy, misty kind of clouds. So this is shot with ND filter, so I get all this misty water. It's not flowy, it's silky water. So that's something you can think about. Okay, so this one, I have a separate video dedicated for this. I'm not sure if I can show you. Okay, yeah. Here there is a separate video dedicated for that. Here, Capture the Lightning is the video title. I have shown you step by step how to take this lightning photos. And yeah, it's a fantastic experience even for me. You know, on a thunderous day, you think about lightning and you see a lot of lightning on your area, and you decide to put a tripod and a camera, just like let it roll 30 seconds long time lapses, and yeah, you get really, really, really good photos. You can consider shooting this as well, and you can take some creative photos. So what I did was basically I time lapsed. I took all the good lightning photos from that bunch, and then I stacked them in Photoshop. So it gave me this awesome photo. So that's something you could try. Yeah, now let's move on to actually looking at some birds. That's it. We have completed this full post, but what I want to show you is a bit more. Okay, let me quickly take a sip, and let's get our lenses up. Okay, so this is what I got today. This is 200 to 600 millimeter lens. I'm going to show you a bit of wildlife, which is one of my favorite photo genre. Okay, Okay, I also have this monopod to place it on the table. The few things to consider when you consider wildlife lens, right? Like these kind of lens. You see this rubber part? This is very important because whenever you shoot wildlife, once you're done, you actually keep it down like this so that it doesn't grip, I mean, it doesn't move. It grips onto the surfaces, which is, I find from this lens, it's like very, very nice. And also the lens hood just like snaps on, which is very, very, very nice. So I'm gonna put my cameras aside and let me expand this part since I'm going to just focus on this. How do you guys feel, like whoever is watching, how do you guys feel this session so far? Is it good? Is it informative? Do you want me to add anything? How is actually the live stream? Is it stable enough or is it like too much fluctuating? Any feedback would be helpful for me. What are they saying?
It's stable and nice info, thank you.
Oh,
By Twitch stream, yeah. Who also has a kit lens currently and is wanting to upgrade to a better lens.
oh, nice, nice, very nice. Okay, so the first thing to do, I don't know if you can see here. Yeah, the first thing to do. Okay, let me first place this. Whenever we buy the lens from the native manufacturers like the Sony or any other camera brand, what they do is something that I don't like at all. So this is the tripod collar. Okay, so yeah, so this is the tripod collar here. What I have done is like I have replaced from the native tripod collar to this tripod collar, which settles down on this Arca Swiss plate. The native, the tripod collar that comes with this lens, it is not having this groove that goes onto the this plate, this Arca Swiss plate. So that's something. In that case, right? What if it doesn't go? So I have to use something like another base plate, like this. So it came with some collar like this. This is a 70 to 200 millimeter lens. And I had to attach another base plate on top of this, which is making it even more heavier. But luckily for this lens, I happen to have a third-party vendor who have this collar attached. So yeah, this same brand also has it for 70 to 200, which I did not buy. Anyway, the first thing to do is get this one for such lenses. It's not focused. Anyway, so now I'm going to attach the camera. It's like you have to settle down the lens first, then you attach the camera. It's always the process. When you attach the camera, you have to make sure that the pin aligns. And yeah, that's it. This is A7C2, and let me stream this instead of A6700. It's gonna be interesting. I've never done this before on a live stream, so that's something interesting. Okay, let me find the cable. Yeah, so these are the switches. I mostly don't use most of them, but yeah, for some people this might be interesting to use these switches, which is fine. If you like it, you use it. I don't use it much. I just use the autofocus manual focus switch, which is very, very useful. I think it got stuck. Anyway, let me pull this up. Okay, so let me go to ah. Okay, so basically, when I'm planning to live stream so much, the cameras tend to overheat because the kind of cameras that I'm using are like not made for live streaming. So yeah, no wonder they get overheated. Dun, dun. Okay, aim eye visible. Oh yeah, okay, got it finally. See how much it shakes, right? So this is what I was saying. The telephoto lenses are always a challenge. This is at 600 millimeters, and this is at 200 millimeters. Not much of a difference, you might think, but it is. Now I'm going to reduce the ISO. You can see how beautiful the scenery looks. Unfortunately, there was one pigeon that was sitting, which left. So, yeah, we are stuck with no pigeons. The whole purpose of sitting here for the live stream is to get the pigeons. But, yeah, no pigeons. Yeah. Okay, let me change the scene. Okay. Mm. Okay, yeah, some. All right. Are we there? Yeah, we are there. Who? Yeah. So, first thing is the autofocus points, right? Put it in the center. Make sure the autofocus is in the center. Yeah, now it's focusing on the bird. See here? Yeah. So make sure if the bird is moving fast, it has to be at least 1,000th of a second. But here, since the bird is just sitting here, no need for 1,000th of a second. You just can do with 1/500th of a second. Since I'm live streaming, it doesn't allow me to take photos. But yeah, this is the kind of reach you get with the 600 millimeters lens. I know it could be very shaky. Especially when the optical stabilization was off. My bad. Yeah, so yeah, let me just focus on this. There's one over there. It doesn't look like pigeon. Oh yeah, it is pigeon. Yeah, see here? If it loses track of the bird, it's kind of hard to get the bird back in focus for any cameras. Why? Because one, the background is busy. Two, the lens elements are so enormous that it takes a lot of time for the lens to move back and forth. Lenses like 300 millimeter lens or something like 400 millimeter f2.8 lens, 600 millimeter f4 lenses, they are made for extreme fast action, like they have multiple motors. Oh, yeah, so they can zoom in and out very fast. But cheap lenses like 200 to 600 millimeter lenses, they don't do that. So you can expect some sort of delay in actually acquiring back the focus. Like I said, yeah, it happens quite a lot. Yeah, and so this is fine. With A7C2, this is fine. The field of view is not too narrow. But with A6700 on the other hand, the field of view is extremely, extremely narrow. And because of that, you might be like struggling really hard to find the bird in focus, like in the frame even. So that's something you need to remember. So this bird is gonna fly. You have to anticipate whenever you're bird watching. You have to anticipate what the bird is gonna do. Yeah. So it was ready to fly. So yeah, you could have taken about to fly shot or just after flying shot. Right. So let's say this one. This looks like a juvenile pigeon. Now it's going to find some grains somewhere, and yeah, it's gonna look out, but it's not gonna fly. It's just gonna keep on walking. But there's something else here. Oops, oops. Yeah. So if it doesn't focus, just hit the shutter button, half press it, and it will start to focus again. Yeah. So now it's focusing there. Let's see what others are doing. Okay, not much. Yeah. So yeah. So the challenge is like first getting the bird into the frame. Number two, focusing it. Number three, making sure the shutter speed is fast enough for you to actually hit the shutter button and get the entire bird sharp. Otherwise, it'll be like so much of motion blur. So that's something that I want to say. Let's say you don't get the bird in the frame. So what do you do? Right? So what you can do is like just zoom out a bit and then you like get the bird in the frame, then zoom in. Make sure that the box, the focusing point is actually on the bird once you get out. So for example, you zoom out, you're lost, you're like looking for the bird, then you find the bird, zoom in. Yeah, and then you half press the shutter button to acquire the focus and make sure you set the shutter speed accordingly depending on the bird's action, then hit right away. That's it. Burst mode. Of course, burst mode. If birds, then click on the autofocus for birds. Yeah, you might need to do all those basic stuff. And also you have to understand that whenever you're shooting birds, it's gonna heat up fast. The camera is gonna heat up fast because it's using a lot of power to run the motors inside the lens. So a lot of burst is actually counterintuitive for the sensor. Once the camera heats up, it is going to negatively affect the image quality. So the sensor will get heat up, a lot of heat will cause some issues with the sensor, which is very bad. So make sure your camera doesn't heat up a lot. If it heats up, allow it to cool down and then re-record again. So yeah, that's the way to think about shooting or filming the birds. Okay, I'm just giving you an example with pigeons. I wish I can show a lot more going places, having stable internet, and talking a lot. And while streaming, unfortunately, I cannot press the shutter button to take photos. But anyway. Okay, any more questions? I'm ready to answer any sort of photography questions. Please bring it on. If you need a follow-up session with a specific thing, let me know in the comments or in the chats. Alissa will help me to get the comment to me, actually. Any comments? Any chat? No? All right. How many people still left?
4.
Wow, nice. Thanks for staying along. Okay, so yeah. The cameras can be very front heavy with such a big huge lens. It's like 2 kgs. So make sure you always are having a steady hand. You know. I think we can end the live stream here. I did not think that we would be ending the live stream in like 2 hours, but yeah, thanks for watching and
Okay.
staying tuned. Yeah.
Comment. Sometimes on my A6700, I've noticed that when it gets hotter, or I've been using it for a while, zooming around on photos on the touch screen will actually become smoother, but I haven't seen anyone say it.
Smoother as in, like, how smooth? Is it like getting laggier or? Okay, I do have A6700 here. It gets quite hot. Actually, even now it's very hot. Smooth as in like it lacks the sharpness, is it?
Usually it's a little laggy before, but when it gets hot, it becomes smooth as butter.
Okay, you mean to say the focus is lost.
I need to wait a bit because live stream is always
Yeah.
delayed.
Okay, so this is a very hot A6700, right? And with this very hot A6700, let's see. No, I think the screen is pretty okay, in my opinion.
No, the touch screen responsiveness when looking at pictures and moving with my finger or zooming in and out.
Ah, touchscreen responses.
So when it's not hot, it's lagging, but when it's hot, it's very easy to navigate. Something like that. That's
Oh,
how I
very
understand
easy
it.
to navigate.
Yeah, like moving back
Ah,
and forth,
okay.
swiping or something like that. That's how I understand it.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Okay. Are you using a screen protector? If not, yeah, it's fine. I'm not using a screen protector. Maybe I should use a screen protector to find. Okay, one more thing. I usually disable my touchscreen. Why? Because I accidentally press something on off. If I'm gonna put my camera on the tripod, only then I activate my touchscreen. Otherwise, I don't. But good for you.
He's not using screen protector.
Okay, good for you that you get smooth when the camera gets hot. Yeah. Right. Oh, okay. I just realized I'm just filming bird dung. Okay. So yeah, birds are gone. Mm, yeah. I think we will close the live stream for now. Oh, birds are back. The beautiful colors. Pigeons, sometimes I hate them, but yeah, they're just beautiful beings. All right. Thanks for sharing your feedback for A6700, which I think I will try to notice them if it is the same case for me as well. Anyway, very nice that some people stayed until the end. Yeah.
Another comment.
Mm-hmm.
That 200 to 600 lens zoom without getting longer right internal zoom? It's a question.
It is. It is internal zoom. Yeah, that's something that I like about this lens. It is completely internal zoom, and it's got an amazing hood on the front. It's actually thin. It's got the slim profile, which I really like. Unlike the Nikon 200 to 500 millimeter lens, this is kind of like hand holdable with my giant hands. It's like it's slim for my hand, but maybe it depends on other hands. Yeah.
So it does not get longer.
It does not get longer. But the problem is it's already very long. Uh, yeah, it's like 32 centimeters or something. It's quite long. If I'm correct, Canon's 200 to 900 millimeter lens is actually kind of shorter than this, or maybe the same size. Yeah. All right. Any questions for Fujifilm though? Like I do have a Fujifilm. Anyway, yeah. Yeah, nice talking with you guys. I'm gonna end this session now, and we will see if you need any more sessions. Let me know. I think you guys are from Discord or Meetup, right? Yeah. Yeah, let me know in the comments down below. Where are you guys from? Like, how do you came to know about this stream? Oh yeah, I do have it here. Okay. Um, Glitch stream. All right. Okay, guys. Thank you so much for staying along for such a long time. Uh, if there is anything, please let me know in the comments down below after this video is getting posted. We will try to reply it for you. And you can always visit the website. I will keep updating it to help the fellow photographers on anything. I will give a lot of examples and sample photos that you can download from that page. And that's the only page I'm going to write about how you can photograph. So that could be the only link that's there for you to understand and come back to revisit to see if anything has gotten improved, right? Yeah. Thank you for staying along again. Yeah. Anyway, signing off, Jay and Alyssa. See you
Thank
guys.
you.